Good evening, tribe. Welcome back to the Tome, the channel in which every week we flip through the pages of human knowledge and read about whoever or whatever we find. And today we are learning about the life and times of Egyptian beauty and legend, Cleopatra. And that's the real Cleopatra. So, if learning about some of history's most memorable, important, or iconic people in podcast format is your thing, then by all means subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and let me know what you think in the comment section below. Okay, let's go. In 65 BC, the Roman censor Marcus Licinius Crassus argued before the Roman Senate that Rome should annex Ptolemaic Egypt. But his proposed bill and the similar bill of Tribune Servilius Rullus in 63 BC were both rejected. Ptolemy XII, responding to the threat of possible annexation by offering remuneration and lavish gifts to powerful Roman statesmen such as Pompey during his campaign against Mithridates VI of Pontus and eventually Julius Caesar after he became Roman consul in 59 BC. However, Ptolemy XII's profligate behaviour bankrupted him, and he was forced to acquire loans from the Roman banker Gaius Rabirius Postumus. In 58 BC, the Romans annexed Cyprus, and on accusations of piracy drove Ptolemy of Cyprus, that's Ptolemy XII's brother, to commit suicide instead of enduring exile to Paphos. Ptolemy XII remained publicly silent on the death of his brother, a decision which, along with ceding traditional Ptolemaic territory to the Romans, damaged his credibility among subjects already enraged by his economic policies. Ptolemy XII was then exiled from Egypt by force, travelling first to Rhodes, then to Athens, and finally the villa of Triumvir Pompey in the Alban Hills, near Praeneste, Italy. Ptolemy XII spent nearly a year there on the outskirts of Rome, ostensibly accompanied by his daughter Cleopatra, then only aged about 11 years old. Bernice IV sent an embassy to Rome to advocate for her rule and opposed the reinstatement of her father, Ptolemy XII. But Ptolemy had assassins kill the leaders of the embassy, an incident that was covered up by his powerful Roman supporters. When the Roman Senate denied Ptolemy XII the offer of an armed escort and provisions for a return to Egypt, he decided to leave Rome in late 57 BC and reside at the temple of Artemis in Ephesus. The Roman financiers of Ptolemy XII remained determined to restore him to power. Pompey persuaded Aulus Gabinius, the Roman governor of Syria, to invade Egypt and restore Ptolemy XII, offering him 10,000 talents of silver for the proposed mission. Although it put him at odds with Roman law, Gabinius invaded Egypt in the spring of 55 BC by way of Hasmonean Judea, where Hyrcanus II had Antipater the Idumean, father of Herod the Great, furnished the Roman-led army with supplies. As a young cavalry officer, Mark Antony was under Gabinius's command. He distinguished himself by preventing Ptolemy XII from massacring the inhabitants of Pelusium, and for rescuing the body of Archelaus, the husband of Bernice IV, after he was killed in battle, ensuring him a proper royal burial. Cleopatra, then 14 years of age, would have travelled with the Roman expedition into Egypt. Later that year, Antony would profess that he had fallen in love with her at the first time. Gabinius was put on trial in Rome for abusing his authority, for which he was later acquitted, but his second trial for accepting bribes led ultimately to his exile, from which he was recalled 7 years later in 48 BC by Caesar. Crassus replaced him as governor of Syria and extended his provincial command to Egypt, but he was killed by the Parthians at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC. Ptolemy XII had Bernice IV and her wealthy supporters executed, seizing their properties. He allowed Gabinius's largely Germanic and Gallic Roman garrison, the Gabianii, to harass people in the streets of Alexandria, and installed his longtime Roman financier Rabirius as his chief financial officer. Within a year, Rabirius was placed under protective custody and sent back to Rome after his life was endangered for draining Egypt of its resources. Despite these problems, Ptolemy XII created a will designating Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII as his joint heirs, oversaw major construction projects such as the Temple of Edfu and a temple at Dendera, and stabilized the economy. On the 31st of May 52 BC, Cleopatra was made a regent of Ptolemy XII. As indicated by an inscription in the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. Rabirius was unable to collect the entirety of Ptolemy XII's debts by the time of the latter's death, and so it passed on to his successors, Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII. Ptolemy XII died sometime before the 22nd of March 51 BC, when Cleopatra, in her first act as queen, began her voyage to Hermonthis, near Thebes, to install a new sacred Bukis bull, worshipped as an intermediary for the god Montu in the ancient Egyptian religion. Cleopatra faced several pressing issues and emergencies shortly after taking the throne. These included famine caused by drought and a low level of the annual flooding of the Nile, and of course lawless behaviour instigated by the Gabiniani, the now unemployed and assimilated Roman soldiers left by Gabinius to garrison Egypt. Inheriting her father's debts, Cleopatra also owed the Roman Republic 17.5 million drachmas. In 50 BC, Marcus Calpurnius Biblius, proconsul of Syria, sent his two eldest sons to Egypt, most likely to negotiate with the Gabiani and recruit them as soldiers in a desperate defence of Syria against the Parthians. However, the Gabiani tortured and murdered these two, perhaps with a secret encouragement by rogue senior administrators in Cleopatra's court. Cleopatra sent the Gabiani culprits to Biblius as prisoners awaiting his judgment, but he sent them back to Cleopatra and chastised her for interfering in their adjudication, which was the prerogative of the Roman state. Bibulus, siding with Pompey in Caesar's civil war, failed to prevent Caesar from landing a naval fleet in Greece, which ultimately allowed Caesar to reach Egypt in pursuit of Pompey. By the 29th of August 51 BC, official documents started listing Cleopatra as the sole ruler, evidence that she had rejected her brother Ptolemy XIII as a co-ruler. She had probably married him, but there is no official record of this. The Ptolemaic practice of sibling marriage was introduced by Ptolemy II and his sister Arsinoe II, a long-held royal Egyptian practice. It was loathed by many contemporary Greeks. By the reign of Cleopatra, however, it was considered a normal arrangement for Ptolemaic rulers. Despite Cleopatra's rejection of him, Ptolemy XIII still retained powerful allies, notably the eunuch Pothinos, his childhood tutor, regent, and administrator of his properties. Others involved in his cabal against Cleopatra included Achillas, a prominent military commander, and Theotus of Chios, another tutor of Ptolemy XIII. Cleopatra seems to have attempted a short-lived alliance with her brother Ptolemy XIV, but by the autumn of 50 BC, Ptolemy XIII had the upper hand in their conflict and began signing documents with his name before that of his sister, followed by the establishment of his first regnal date in 49 BC. After returning to Italy from the wars in Gaul and crossing the Rubicon in January of 49 BC, Caesar had forced Pompey and his supporters to flee Greece. In perhaps the last joint decree, both Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII agreed to Gnaeus Pompeius's request and sent his father 60 ships and 500 troops, including the Gibeoni, a move that helped erase some of the debt owed to Rome. Losing the fight against her brother, Cleopatra was then forced to flee Alexandria and withdraw to the region of Thebes. By the spring of 48 BC, Cleopatra had travelled to Rome and Syria with her younger sister Arsinoe IV to gather an invasion force that would head to Egypt. She returned with an army, but her advance to Alexandria was blocked by her brother's forces, including some other Gibeoni, mobilised to fight against her. So she camped outside Pelusium in the eastern Nile Delta. In Greece, Caesar and Pompey's forces engaged each other at the decisive Battle of Pharsalus on the 9th of August 48 BC, leading to the destruction of most of Pompey's army and his forced flight to Tyre in Lebanon. Given his close relationship with the Ptolemies, Pompey ultimately decided that Egypt would be his last place of refuge, where he could replenish his forces. Ptolemy XIII's advisors, however, feared the idea of Pompey using Egypt as his base in a protracted Roman civil war. In a scheme devised by Theodotus, Pompey arrived by ship near Pelusium after being invited by a written message, only to be ambushed and stabbed to death on the 28th of September 48 BC. Ptolemy XIII believed he had demonstrated his power and simultaneously diffused the situation by having Pompey's head severed and embalmed, sent to Caesar, who arrived in Alexandria by early October and took up residence at the royal palace. Caesar expressed grief and outrage over the killing of Pompey and called on both Ptolemy XIII and Cleopatra to disband their forces and reconcile with each other. Ptolemy XIII arrived at Alexandria at the head of his army, in clear defiance of Caesar's demand that he disband and leave his army before his arrival. Cleopatra initially sent emissaries to Caesar, but upon allegedly hearing that Caesar was inclined to having affairs with royal women, she came to Alexander to see him personally. Historian Cassius Dio records that she did so without informing her brother, dressed in an attractive manner, and charmed Caesar with her wit. Plutarch provides an entirely different and perhaps mythical account that alleges she was bound inside a bed sack to be smuggled into the palace to meet Caesar. When Ptolemy XIII realised that his sister was in the palace consorting directly with Caesar, he attempted to rouse the populace of Alexandria into a riot, but he was arrested by Caesar, who used his oratorial skills to calm the frenzied crowd. Caesar then brought Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII before the Assembly of Alexandria, where Caesar revealed the written will of Ptolemy XII, previously possessed by Pompey, naming both Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII as his joint heirs. Caesar then attempted to arrange for the other two siblings, Arsinoe IV and Ptolemy XIV, to rule together over Cyprus, thus removing potential rival claimants to the Egyptian throne, whilst also appeasing the Ptolemaic subjects still bitter over the loss of Cyprus to the Romans in 58 BC. Sometime between January and March of 47 BC, Caesar's reinforcements arrived, including those led by Mithridates of Pergamon and Antipater the Idumean. Ptolemy XIII and Arsinoe IV withdrew their forces to the Nile, where Caesar attacked them. Ptolemy XIII tried to flee by boat, but it capsized and he drowned. Ganymedes may have been killed in the battle. Theodotus was found years later in Asia by Marcus Junius Brutus and executed. Theodotus was found years later in Asia, of all places, by Marcus Junius Brutus. He was then executed. Arsinoe IV was forcibly paraded in Caesar's triumph in Rome before being exiled to the temple of Artemis at Ephesus. Cleopatra was conspicuously absent from these events and resided in the palace, most likely because she had been pregnant with Caesar's child since September the 48th BC. Caesar's term as consul had expired by the end of 48 BC. However, Antony, an officer of his, helped to secure Caesar's appointment as dictator, lasting for a year, until October 47 BC, providing Caesar with the legal authority to settle the dynastic dispute in Egypt. Wary of repeating the mistake of Cleopatra's sister Bernice IV in having a female monarch as sole ruler, Caesar appointed Cleopatra's 12-year-old brother Ptolemy XIV as joint ruler with the now 22-year-old Cleopatra in a nominal sibling marriage, but Cleopatra continued living privately with Caesar. The exact date at which Cyprus was returned to her control is not known to history, although she had a governor there by 42 before Christ. Caesar is alleged to have joined Cleopatra for a cruise along the River Nile and sightseeing off Egyptian monuments. Although this may have been a romantic fairy tale reflecting later well-to-do Roman proclivities and not a real historical event, the historian Suetonius provides considerable details about the voyage, including the use of Thermalagos, the pleasure barge constructed by Ptolemy IV, which during his reign measured 90 metres in length and 24 metres in height and was complete with dining rooms, state rooms, holy shrines and promenades along its two decks, resembling a floating villa. Caesar could have had an interest in the River Nile cruise owing to his fascination with geography. He was well read in the works of Eratosthenes and Pytheas, and perhaps wanted to discover the source of the river, but turned back before reaching Ethiopia. Caesar departed Egypt around April 47 BC, allegedly to confront Pharnaces II of Pontus, the son of Mithridates VI of Pontus, who was stirring up trouble for Rome in Anatolia. It is possible that Caesar, married to the prominent Roman woman Calpurnia, also wanted to avoid being seen together with Cleopatra when she bore him their son. He left 3 legions in Egypt, later increased to 4, under the command of freedman Rufio, to secure Cleopatra's tenuous position, but also, perhaps, to keep her activities in check. Caesarion, that's Cleopatra's alleged child with Caesar, was born on the 23rd of June 47 BC and was originally named Pharaoh Caesar, as preserved on a stele at the Sephorum in Memphis. Perhaps owing to his still childless marriage with Calpurnia, Caesar remained publicly silent about Caesarion, but perhaps accepted his parentage in private. Cleopatra, on the other hand, made repeated official declarations about Caesarion's parentage, even going as far as publicly naming Caesar as the father. Cleopatra and her nominal joint ruler, Ptolemy XIV, visited Rome sometime in late 46 BC, presumably without Caesarion, and were given lodgings in Caesar's villa within the Horti Caesarius. As with their father, Ptolemy XII, Caesar awarded both Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIV the legal status of friend and ally of the Roman people. In effect, client rulers loyal to Rome. Cleopatra's visitors at Caesar's villa across the Tiber included the senator Cicero, who found her arrogant, Sosigenes of Alexandria, one of the members of Cleopatra's court, aided Caesar in the calculations for the new Julian calendar put into effect on the 1st of January 45 BC. The Temple of Venus Genetrix, established in the Forum of Caesar on the 25th of September 46 BC, contained a golden statue of Cleopatra, which stood there at least until the 3rd century AD, associating the mother of Caesar's child directly with the goddess Venus, mother of the Romans. The statue also subtly linked the Egyptian goddess Isis with the Roman religion. Cleopatra's presence in Rome most likely had an effect on the events at the Lupercalia festival a month before Caesar's assassination. Mark Antony attempted to place a royal diadem on Caesar's head, but the latter refused in what was most likely a staged performance. Perhaps to gauge the Roman public's mood about accepting Hellenistic-style kingship, Cicero, who was present at the festival, mockingly asked where the diadem came from, an obvious reference to the Ptolemaic queen, who he abhorred. Caesar was assassinated on the Ides of March, that's the 15th of March, 44 BC, but Cleopatra stayed in Rome until about mid-April in the vain hope of having Caesarion recognised as Caesar's heir. However, Caesar's will named his grand-nephew Octavian as the primary heir, and Octavian arrived in Italy around the time Cleopatra decided to depart back for Egypt. A few months later, Cleopatra had Ptolemy XIV killed by poisoning, elevating her son Caesarion as her co-ruler. Octavian, Antony, and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus formed the Second Triumvirate in 43 BC, in which they were each elected for 5-year terms to restore order in the Republic and bring Caesar's assassins to justice. Cleopatra received messages from both Gaius Cassius Longinus, one of Caesar's assassins, and Publius Cornelius Dolabella, proconsul of Syria and Caesarian loyalist, requesting military aid. She decided to write Cassius an excuse that her kingdom faced too many internal problems, while sending the 4 legions left by Caesar in Egypt to Dolabella. However, these troops were captured by Cassius in Palestine, whilst Cepharion, Cleopatra's governor of Cyprus, defected to Cassius and provided him with ships. Cleopatra took her own fleet to Greece to personally assist Octavian and Antony, but her ships were heavily damaged in a Mediterranean storm and she arrived too late to aid in the fighting. By the autumn of 42 BC, Antony had defeated the forces of Caesar's assassins at the Battle of Philippi in Greece, leading to the suicide of Crassus and Brutus. By the end of 42 BC, Octavian had gained control over much of the western half of the Roman Republic, and Antony the eastern half, with Lepidus largely marginalised. In the summer of 41 BC, Antony established his headquarters at Tarsos in Anatolia and summoned Cleopatra there in several letters, which she rebuffed until Antony's envoy, Quintus Dellius, convinced her to come. The meeting would allow Cleopatra to clear up the misconception that she had supported Cassius during the Civil War and address territorial exchanges in the Levant. But Antony also undoubtedly desired to form a personal, romantic relationship with the exotic queen. Cleopatra sailed up the Kydnos River to Tarsos in Thalamagos, hosting Antony and his officers for 2 nights of lavish banquets on board the ship. Cleopatra managed to clear her name as a supposed supporter of Cassius, arguing she had really attempted to help Dolabella in Syria and convinced Antony to have her exiled sister Arsinoe IV executed at Ephesus. Cleopatra's former rebellious governor of Cyprus was also handed over to her for execution. Cleopatra invited Antony to come to Egypt before departing from Tarsos, which led Antony to visit Alexandria by November 41 BC. Antony was well received by the populace of Alexandria, both for his heroic actions in restoring Ptolemy XII to power and for coming to Egypt without an occupation force like Caesar had done. In Egypt, Antony continued to enjoy the lavish royal lifestyle he had witnessed aboard Cleopatra's ship docked at Tarsus. He also had his subordinates, such as Publius Vendilius Bassus, drive the Parthians out of Anatolia and Syria. Cleopatra carefully chose Antony as her partner for producing further heirs, as he was deemed to be the most powerful Roman figure following Caesar's demise. With his powers as triumvirate, Antony also had the broad authority to restore former Ptolemaic lands, which were currently in Roman hands. Whilst it is clear that both Sicilia and Cyprus were under Cleopatra's control by the 19th of November 38 BC, the transfer probably occurred earlier in the winter of 41 to 40 BC during her time spent with Antony. By the spring of 40 BC, Antony left Egypt due to troubles in Syria, where his governor Lucius Decidius Saxa was killed and his army taken by Quintus Labienus, a former officer under Crassus, who now served the Parthian Empire. Cleopatra provided Antony with 200 ships for his campaign and as a payment for her newly acquired territories. She would not see Antony again until 37 BC, but she maintained correspondence, and evidence suggests she kept a spy in his camp. By the end of 40 BC, Cleopatra had given birth to twins, a boy named Alexander Helios and a girl named Cleopatra Selene II, both of whom Antony acknowledged as his children. Helios, the sun, and Selene, the moon, were symbolic of a new era of societal rejuvenation, as well as an indication that Cleopatra hoped Antony would repeat the exploits of Alexander the Great by conquering the Parthians. In 36 BC, Cleopatra accompanied Antony to the Euphrates in his journey towards invading the Parthian Empire. She then returned to Egypt, perhaps due to her advanced state of pregnancy. By the summer of 36 BC, she had given birth to Ptolemy Philadelphus, her second son with Antony. Antony's Parthian campaign in 36 BC turned into a complete debacle for a number of reasons. In particular, the betrayal of Artavasdes II of Armenia, who defected to the Parthian side. After losing some 30,000 men, more than Crassus at Carrhae, an indignity that he had hoped to avenge, Antony finally arrived at Leucocome, near Berytus, that's near modern-day Beirut in Lebanon. He arrived in December, engaged in heavy drinking before Cleopatra arrived to provide funds and clothing for his battered troops. Antony decided to avoid the risks involved in returning to Rome, so he travelled with Cleopatra back to Alexandria to see his newborn son. Whilst Octavian occupied Athens, Antony and Cleopatra landed at Para-Etonion in Egypt. The couple then went their separate ways, Antony to Cyrene to raise more troops, and Cleopatra to the harbour at Alexandria in an attempt to mislead the oppositional party and portray the activities in Greece as a victory. She was afraid that news about the outcome of the battle at Actium would lead to a rebellion. It is uncertain whether or not at this time she actually executed Arvastides II and sent his head to his rival Arvastides I of Media in an attempt to strike an alliance with him. Lucius Pinarius, that's Mark Antony's appointed governor in Cyrene, received word that Octavian had won the Battle of Actium before Antony's messengers could arrive at his court. Pinarius had these messengers executed and then defected to Octavian's side, surrendering to him the 4 legions under his command that Antony had decided to obtain. Antony nearly committed suicide after hearing news of this, but was stopped by his staff officers. In Alexandria, he built a reclusive cottage on the island of Pharos that he nicknamed Timonian, after the philosopher Timon of Athens, who was famous for his cynicism and misanthropy. Herod, who had personally advised Antony after the Battle of Actium that he should betray Cleopatra, travelled to Rhodes to meet Octavian and resign his kingship out of loyalty to Antony. Octavian was impressed by his speech and sense of loyalty, so he allowed him to maintain his position in Judea, further isolating Antony and Cleopatra. Cleopatra perhaps started to view Antony as a liability by the late summer of 31 BC, when she prepared to leave Egypt to her son Caesarion. Cleopatra planned to relinquish her throne to him, take her fleet from the Mediterranean into the Red Sea, and then set sail to a foreign port, perhaps in India, where she could spend time recuperating. However, these plans were ultimately abandoned when Malichus I, as advised by Octavian's governor in Syria, managed to burn Cleopatra's fleet in revenge for his losses in a war with Herod that Cleopatra had largely started. Cleopatra had no other option but to stay in Egypt and negotiate with Octavian, although, most likely, later pro-Octavian propaganda, it was reported that at the time Cleopatra started testing the strength of various poisons on prisoners and even on her own servants. Cleopatra had Caesarion enter the ranks of the Ephebi, which demonstrated that Cleopatra was now grooming her son to become the sole ruler in Egypt. In a show of solidarity, Antony had Marcus Antius Antalius, that's his son with Fulvia, enter the Ephebi at the same time. Separate messages and envoys from Antony and Cleopatra were then sent to Octavian, all stationed at Rhodes, although Octavian seemed to have replied only to Cleopatra. Cleopatra's requested that her children should inherit Egypt and that Antony should be allowed to live in exile in Egypt, offered Octavian money in the future, and immediately sent him lavish gifts. Octavian sent his diplomat Thyrsos to Cleopatra after she threatened to burn herself and vast amounts of her treasure within a tomb already under construction. Thyrsos advised her to kill Antony so that her life would be spared, but when Antony suspected foul play, he had the diplomat flogged and sent back to Octavian without a deal. After lengthy negotiations that ultimately produced no results, Octavian set out to invade Egypt in the spring of 30 BC, stopping at Ptolemaic in Phoenicia, where his new ally Herod provided his army with fresh supplies. Octavian moved south and swiftly took Pelusium, whilst Cornelius Gallus marched eastward from Cyrene, defeating Antony's forces near Parrhasium. Octavian advanced quickly to Alexandria, but Antony returned and won a small victory over Octavian's tired troops outside the city of Hippodrome. However, on August 1st, 30 BC, Antony's naval fleet surrendered to Octavian, followed by Antony's cavalry. Cleopatra hid herself in her tomb with her close attendants and sent a message to Antony that she had committed suicide. In despair, Antony responded to this by stabbing himself in the stomach and taking his own life at the age of 53. According to Plutarch, he was still dying when brought to Cleopatra at her tomb, telling her that he had died honourably and that she could trust Octavian's companion Gaius Proculius over anyone else in his entourage. It was Proculius, however, who infiltrated her tomb using a ladder and detained the queen, denying her ability to burn herself with her treasures. Cleopatra was then allowed to embalm and bury Antony within her tomb before she was escorted to the palace. Octavian entered Alexandria, occupied the palace, and seized Cleopatra's 3 youngest children. When she met with Octavian, Cleopatra told him bluntly, "I will not be led in a triumph." Octavian promised that he would keep her alive, but offered no explanation about his future plans for her kingdom. When a spy informed her that Octavian planned to move her and her children to Rome in 3 days, she prepared for suicide, as she had no intentions of being paraded in a Roman triumph like her sister Arsinoe IV had. It is unclear if Cleopatra's suicide on the 10th of August 30 BC at the age of 39 took place within the palace or within her tomb. It is said that she was accompanied by her servants Arias and Charmian, who also took their own lives. Octavian was said to have been angered by the outcome, but had Cleopatra buried in royal fashion next to Anthony in her tomb. Cleopatra's physician, Olympios, did not explain her cause of death, although the popular belief is that she allowed an asp or Egyptian cobra to bite and poison her. Plutarch relates this tale, but then suggests that an implement was used to induce the toxin by scratching, whilst Dio says that she injected the poison with a needle, and Strabo argued for an ointment of some kind. No venomous snake, however, was found with her body, but she did have tiny puncture wounds on her arm that could have been caused by a needle. Cleopatra decided in her last moments to send Caesarion away to Upper Egypt, perhaps with plans to flee to Kushite, Nubia, Ethiopia, or even India. Caesarion, now Ptolemy XV, would reign for a mere 18 days until executed on the orders of Octavian on the 29th of August 30 BC, after returning to Alexandria under the false pretense that Octavian would allow him to be king. And that brings us to the end of the life and times of Cleopatra, one of the most amazing and, certainly to me, interesting women from history. Sometimes how you often wish that you could go back in a time machine and visit moments and places that are very important through history. I know it's a bit of a cliche that, not most people want to do that, but if there's anyone that I could visit, it would be Cleopatra. I'd love to sail down the Nile on her special ship with all her attendants, with a nice glass of fruit juice and the Nile before me. I think I would love that. Well, I hope you loved this video. I'm trying to do one video a week on this channel now. The channel is getting some traction. I'm very grateful to that. For those of you that have subscribed, I had abandoned the channel. I didn't think it was going anywhere, but then it suddenly started getting picked up and we started getting some more views. So onwards and upwards to 500 subscribers and then 1,000, and then we'll see where we go from there. But thank you very much for watching. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share the video around, and let me know what you think in the comment section below. But I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.